from the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
It is my pleasure to welcome you to a 6-week series entitled Our Dissolving Privacy, Who's Minding Your Business? For our longtime viewers, you know from time to time we do a long series, and this particular one comes to you because the North Idaho College Popcorn Forum and the North Idaho College Convocation Series, along with the Associated Students of North Idaho College, made it possible. Recently on our campus we had 6 speakers to discuss this very important topic, and they all came by our studio for an interview. We'd like to start the first of the 6-week series with the subtopic, the right to privacy, and overview. On behalf of the panel and the staff, it is a great pleasure to welcome to our program to commence this series Mr. Bill Press. He comes with great credentials for this topic and a number of others. For example, he was chosen in 1992 as the best commentator of the year by the Los Angeles Press Club. He won that distinction because of his work that he does in Los Angeles. He is the evening news commentator for TV Channel 13 in Los Angeles, and he also hosts on Saturday the KFI radio talk show entitled The Last Word, which I may add is the most listened to in the Los Angeles area. Press has also won 3 Emmys and a gold mic for his hard-hitting commentaries. And as I indicated, he will discuss privacy from an overview. Mr. Press, it's a pleasure having you on our program.
Thank you. Good to be here. Thank you.
And as always, I'm very happy to have our 2 regular panelists. First of all, Janelle Burke, who is an attorney in the state of Idaho. And next to her is Steve Schenck, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College. And I shall ask Janelle to commence the questioning.
Fire away.
Bill, as Americans, we've had a great history of interest in the privacy aspect of our lives. How much privacy do we really have? And in order to answer that question, let's start with some kind of a definition first of privacy, and then get into the broader aspects of how much privacy do we actually have.
Well, I think the best definition of privacy is the definition given by Justice Louis Brandeis in 1928 in the Olmstead decision in the United States Supreme Court. This happened not far from here. It was in Seattle. It was a prohibition case, a bootlegging case, a phone wiretapping case, and the government was wiretapping this dealer's phones, and the Supreme Court ruled that it was okay for the government to do so because while the Fourth Amendment prohibited physical searches, it didn't say anything about a telephonic search. And of course the court has changed, reversed itself now. But at that time, writing for the minority, Justice Brandeis defined privacy as the right to be let alone. And he also called it the right most valued by civilized men and women. He didn't say women, I add women, but I think that shows how important privacy is to every American. We don't want big government in our homes, in our bedrooms, in our offices, in our papers. We don't want big business in our homes, in our offices, in our papers, in our bodies. And that's I think the one issue on which we all agree, liberals and conservatives, Republicans and Democrats. But the second part of your question is we have very little privacy, actually. That's what's frightening. We value it so much, but we have so little of it. Privacy is not written, the word does not appear in the Declaration of Independence. Privacy, the word does not appear in the United States Constitution. There are very, very weak federal laws, at best, protecting our right of privacy. Only 10 out of 50 states have the right of privacy written into their Constitution. And the result of all of that is that today, I think it's an information free-for-all. Our lives are an open book. Everything we do, every purchase we make, every decision we make is all recorded somewhere in that great book in the sky, and it's going to come back to haunt us, and it does all the time.
Is our lack of privacy greater now, do you think, than it used to be?
Oh, absolutely.
And that's because of electronics?
Yes. Well, I think it's because of government that continues to insist in intruding in our daily lives in any way it can get away with it, federal and state government. But it's especially true also because of electronics. I mean, computers are wonderful, wonderful instruments, can store all this data. But what happens to that data once it's stored? And what is the protection for our personal, be careful there with the microphone, but our very personal data that's stored in these computers? There's almost no protection whatsoever right now.
Now, along with government intrusion into our lives, there's also a new aspect, or perhaps it's not new, but we're hearing a lot about it, where individuals get into someone else's life. And that's the stalking and so forth. And is that a new thing, do you think, or just something that's always been going on?
It is, and it's frightening. There are basically three main large private data banks called super banks, TRW and Equifax, and I forget the name of the. But there are dozens of smaller ones. And then there are middlemen, who get information like from, if you subscribe to a magazine, and we will fill out all these forms without even thinking about it. We apply for a new credit card, and we fill out this information without even thinking about it. Well, all that goes into one of these banks, and then there are people who take that information and sell it to someone else, and then sell it to someone else. The case that strikes home to me most clearly is the actress Rebecca Schaefer in West Hollywood, where I live, that part of Los Angeles, was shot and killed by a total stranger who came to her door of her apartment, knocked on her door, and with a gun. He was infatuated with her, and sort of like, she won't marry me, so I'm going to kill her. And he got that. He got her address. He got her home telephone number. He got the kind of car she drove, where she shopped, all from a private computer. I mean, people should not have access to that kind of information. It's appalling.
Steve Sheen.
No, we sometimes think, and in your speech earlier, you mentioned George Orwell's novel 1984, right. But we sometimes think of Big Brother being big government, and yet it seems that much of the information you've been talking about is driven by the profit motive and is held by private companies. Do you see one as being a more serious threat to the individual's right to privacy than the other?
I don't know that one is more serious. They're both very serious. It's Big Brother and all the little brothers, as I call them. It's not just government, but it is government, and we can't get away from that. I mean, recently the FBI called for the ability to get access to every other government computer that existed for any reason whatsoever. They said that they should be the mother of all data banks, and all kinds of medical records and telephone records and everything. Unfortunately, the Congress didn't give them that authority, but there are so many different government data banks. And then you've got the private, the ones that are commercial, the ones that are for sale, is just as frightening. And of course, there's an exchange. They feed on each other. I think we ought to jump back for just a second, and why I think this is so dangerous is, one is, I really believe there's kind of a leveling influence with this, that if people know that everything they do is monitored, everything, then this is what Orwell talked about. If everything we do is monitored, everything we do is stored away somewhere, if everything we do is is recorded and used against us by Big Brother or Little Brother, I think people feel less free, and they're less free to be themselves. We are all we feel constrained and restrained, and it takes some of the yeast, and independence out of life. And the second danger I see is that it's not just physical evidence. I mean, we're all bothered that if we subscribe to Gourmet magazine, for example, suddenly we'll get subscription notices from 12 other magazines. I mean, that's if you know where it's coming from, or if you give one political contribution, then everybody ever runs for office has your name and number, and you've got all kinds of solicitations. That's bothersome enough. What's more bothersome, and the real danger I see, is that with this information stored up there somewhere, there are decisions that are being made about us that we have no idea about. We are being denied credit. We're being denied a bank loan. We're being denied a job. We're being denied life insurance based on information, which, by the way, could be faulty. It's not necessarily true because it's in the data bank. And those decisions are being made. We know anything. Nobody has ever faced us and said, can't hire you for this reason. It's this invisible sort of super government.
Janelle asked you a question about...
Long answer, I know, but I get exercised about this issue.
In response to one of her earlier questions, you talked about the lack of any reference to privacy in the Constitution. You told a story earlier that I wish you'd tell again about one of the exceptions. There is at least one a legal prohibition about information that can be given out, and it has to do with video stores. Would you tell that story?
Well, it's a matter of the federal legislation, but I want to come back. The Constitution, right, the word of privacy is not there. But the courts over the years have found sort of underpinnings of the right of privacy in the Fourth Amendment, in unreasonable search and seizure in the First Amendment, the right of assembly, in the Fifth Amendment, in the Ninth, I think in the 14th as well. So they keep looking for little phrases that they can say, well, this must mean privacy, but the word is not there. The one place in federal law, and there are maybe 8 or 10 laws regarding privacy, they're very weak and they're full of loopholes, except one exception, airtight, that you cannot get access to the records of videos that people have rented to watch at home. And this came about because Robert Bork, when he was up for the Supreme Court, one reporter in Washington went out and went to the local video store near Bork's house and got the records of all the videos that he had rented and published them in the Post. And of course, he went there looking for Debbie Does Dallas or Deep Throat, or Behind the Green Door, and he was disappointed that all he found were John Wayne movies, which I guess you might expect from some swaggering guy like Bork. But the members of Congress were so threatened by that, or so outraged, I think they were so threatened by that, that they passed the Video Protection Act. So renting a pornographic movie today and watching it at home is the one thing you can do that you know that nobody else is ever going to know about. The one thing you can do that will not be published on the front page of the Coeur d'Alene Press. I guess, as I said this morning, I take some comfort in the fact that my video records are private. I wish my bank account were, and my medical records were, and my driver's license, and my Social Security, and my telephone records. They can have my video records.
Bill, you certainly referred to the Constitution of the United States, and that the word privacy is not found in the U.S. Constitution. And you also have made a comment out of the 50 state constitutions we have that 10 of those have a provision that protects privacy, the other 40 do not. And there's debate with constitutional scholars on this whole issue. Although the U.S. Supreme Court has on more than one occasion indicated that, particularly in the Ninth Amendment, that they would describe that privacy is there. Do you think that this whole process that you're talking about in many, many different areas of people's privacy would be enhanced by a change in the language of both state and the U.S. Constitution in relation to privacy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it is so fundamental, number one, and it is so threatened, and so increasingly threatened with every new modern convenience. Something I talked about today, caller ID, which is the rage now in California. You get a phone, and when you get a call coming in, the telephone number of the party who's calling flashes in front of you, and people say, oh, this is great. I mean, then I can decide who I want to talk to and who I don't want to talk to. If it's not grandma calling, or if it is grandma calling, I don't want to talk to her, but I just don't take the call. But the reverse people don't realize is that then when you make a call, everybody knows who's calling, and if it's a business, for example, they see your number and they can punch it up in the computer and they can find out everything about you. So it really is an invasion of privacy, and with more and more conveniences like this coming, there are going to be more and more threats to our privacy. Supermarket cards, so that discount buying, they encourage you to do this, and you put in your card, and then and every purchase you make, everything that goes across that little beeper, the scanner, is recorded, and that information then is sold. So, you buy 6 hot dogs, right? You're on the list for Oscar Mayer to send you some kind of piece of junk mail, and you can see hemorrhoid medicine. I mean, there's no secrets anymore, right? I think we have to go to the United States Constitution, which is tougher, but particularly to the state constitutions. And it's well known that California, 10 states protect the right of privacy in their state constitution. California does. The state of Washington does, the state of Montana does, the state of Idaho, shame on you, does not. So I hope coming out of this forum would be the 3 of you sit down and write some language and take it to the legislature and to Cecil Andrus and say, let's protect the right of privacy of all the citizens of the state of Idaho, and write it in our Constitution so that even if Washington never gets his act together, we've got our act together and our citizens are protected here.
I have a technical question before going back to Janelle. And that has to do with the fact that we have such sophisticated high tech in our society with computers and very inexpensive small video cameras and communication systems. Has the technology reached the level of sophistication that it might be impossible to bring about a certain level of privacy even though if you had the proper legislation to do so?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, we can use the technology to police the technology. You can put blocks on computers, or you can put. I mean, we do that. When at my television station in Los Angeles, when I sit down at the computer, I have to enter my access code, and if I even make a mistake typing my name, I can't get into my own computer. There are parts of the computer, probably here too, that I can get into as a journalist, as a reporter, or commentator, but I can't access because I'm not a director, or I can't access because I'm not the news director. So we can use the technology to police itself, and I think we have to. Two suggestions that I think could put a stop to a lot of this selling of technology. One is to require that we have to give our written permission for data about us to be transferred from any one database to another. Why not? I mean, they couldn't physically move us from one place to another without our permission. That information, that's us. I mean, that's one side of us. It's all the pertinent data about us, number one. And number two, I think when they do use my name, or when they use any information about me, that I ought to get paid for it. Royalty for my information. It is me. It is vital to me. It's just like a movie star or an actor or an actress gets a little royalty check every time somebody sees a movie or rents a home video. If they're using my name and using my data, damn it, I ought to get paid for it.
Janelle Berg.
Well, it seems to me that all of this is sort of a balancing, perhaps, between the freedom of speech, the freedom of information, and on the other hand, the right to privacy. A part of this is what the National Rifle Association argues, of course, that if all of this information is available, everyone's going to know who owns the guns. So how do you decide how to balance out those two aspects?
Well, that's the great fun of democracy, of course. I mean, it's always a balancing act. There's very legitimate use of computer technology and even surveillance equipment that sometimes is very important. I wish they had better surveillance equipment on this wacko from Waco, David Koresh, and his cult, so that 4 federal agents weren't killed when they went into that property. Sometimes it's very necessary for police to use either wiretaps or to go through garbage or to go through medical records to find someone that they have sufficient reason to believe might have committed a crime.
Or is a danger to society.
Or is a danger to society. So sure, we don't want to eliminate that, but at the same time, it's the unwarranted intrusion, I think, that we have to protect against. And right now, with everything just being an open book, with you and I never having committed a crime, having our information just transferred. I mean, the average person, information about you and me, an average day is transferred 5 times from one data bank to another. Again, without our knowledge. So this stuff is flying around out there, and we haven't done anything except sit here on this television show. I mean, that's what we're really fighting against. I think there are more controls now. I mean, I think there are fewer controls now than there have to be on the transfer of this technology, and it won't be a problem for the law enforcement to have the access that they need when they need it, when it's reasonable and when it is warranted. It's all the other stuff, I think, that's at risk today.
Steve Sheen.
Bill, you do a very popular open mic radio show in Los Angeles, and I'm sure you talk about privacy from time to time. What do your listeners tell you? Where are they split on this? Are they heavily in favor of increasing the individual's right to privacy?
You know, it's probably the one issue that Rush Limbaugh and I agree on. And I mean, he's on the show right before I am. I come on after him. I follow him. I call myself the thinking person's alternative to Rush Limbaugh, which someone pointed out is not hard. But now people are demanding of their privacy, very, very jealous of their privacy, and I think rightfully so. And I think they feel it ebbing away and slipping away, and at every level. They get the junk mail, they get the phone calls, they read the stories about accident reports and medical records and everything being open, and it worries them. I think it really does worry them. People feel that when you come back to it, the right to be let alone, that you can kind of close your door and that's your area. And it's not that way anymore. Even certain sexual acts in many states, oral sex is illegal, and this Supreme Court has said, even if the consenting adults behind closed doors, the cops have a right to pry in there, poke in there, take pictures, make an arrest for consenting sex between consenting adults. I mean, it's ridiculous. I find that people are really worried about this, and maybe they don't know what to do about it, but they don't like it. And I'm talking about across the board: liberals, conservatives, libertarians, Republicans, Democrats. It's a real issue.
Has there then not been one galvanizing incident that has really moved people to express their displeasure to government? Or what is keeping something from being done, do you think?
Maybe that's it. I mean, Robert Bork was one example. But gee, I mean, just such a tiny example. See, yeah, great, our video rentals are protected. So what? What about my bank account again? What about my doctor's visits? What about my credit card accounts? Maybe we need a galvanizing incident. But also, maybe we need to just wake up to the everyday incidences, like go to cash a check. Can I see your driver's license? Your driver's license number goes on the back of the car. In California now, you go to DMV to renew your driver's license or to register your car. They demand your Social Security number. You cannot get service unless you give them your Social Security number by state law. I think that's an outright invasion of privacy, because with Social Security numbers today, you can get anywhere. I mean, you go to Sears or something for credit, and you've got to fill out, all this other information. And we do it. We do it without thinking. Well, it's time maybe to stop and think.
Bill, something else you did today, and that sometimes is something that some individuals will not do, but you criticize in your own field. You criticize your colleagues today in the media for also invading privacy. Would you like to elaborate upon why you think that that has been a problem, and what should the media do to police itself in relation to invasion of other people's privacy?
I'm very disappointed at the media. The media feel they have a license to poke and probe and pry into anybody's life for any reason. It's not fair, and we see it. I'm not. I'll tell you a little story. I'm not a reporter. I'm a commentator, and I was out one day with a crew doing a stand-up, as we call it in the trade, for one of my commentaries. This happened to be in San Francisco, and I got beeped by the news director. There was a murder in a courtroom in San Rafael, California, across the Golden Gate Bridge. And I was the closest person with a camera there, and I was told to get over there right away. And it didn't matter that I wasn't a reporter. I had to go there and report on that. And I did my job as a reporter. I mean, I went, and the body was still in the courtroom, and it was a mess, and kind of covered the story and found out who this guy was, who had killed, and where that person lived. And I went to get a picture of the apartment, and then somebody told me that this guy's newly happened widow, and he'd been married like 6 months, was in her apartment. And I started toward the door of the apartment to knock on the door, and then I said, damn it, I'm not going to do that. I mean, this poor woman has got enough problems now dealing with this. Why should I, as a reporter, go and stick my microphone in her face and say, how does it feel? Your mother-in-law just shot your husband or something like that. I mean, it's just outrageous. But you see that happening all the time. Parents who lose their kids, reporter, how does it feel, That's wrong. It's wrong. It's invasion of privacy. And I believe all this rush to get after candidates and go for aspects of their personal lives that is really none of our business. Jennifer Flowers, Bill Clinton, none of our business. I mean, we're talking about public office, public performance. That's what they ought to be talking about. Position on the issues, performance in office, not performance in bed. And if the media doesn't start policing itself, in my opinion, in this area, then I think you could easily see some attempt at government restriction, which would be constitutionally disastrous as well. But the media are bringing it on themselves.
Janelle Berg.
You have some prescription for action here now. So what do you suggest that we do about this?
Well, I think, first of all, as citizens, we have to realize recognize and value how important our privacy is to us. That's kind of
Pretty fundamental.
Pretty fundamental, that's right. Recognize how threatened it is, and that's why, I mean, this forum, to all of you, congratulations, is great, because I think it really is awakening the public in this area to say, hey, they're taking it away from us, and we better act. So we recognize the importance of it, recognize its value, recognize how much it's threatened, and then be ready to fight for it, and to fight to defend the privacy of others. I mean, for example, mandatory drug testing in the workplace. I mean, it's a big hue and cry for it, because people say we're losing the war on drugs. But what price are we willing to pay to win the war on drugs? Are we willing to sacrifice our right of privacy? That's what that amounts to. If anybody can force you to pee in a bottle for any reason at any time, I mean, that's pretty fundamental invasion of the right of privacy. And I think we've got to fight that, fight things like caller ID, and be ready to fight. Demand legislation, for example, that would require our written authorization before any transfer of information, and get that royalty payment. I say, if they have to pay for it, they're not going to do it as often. And we, you know, at least we're getting something out of it. You know, it's sort of like I get a piece of the action, right? It's the American way. And the other challenge, I said, repeat what I said to Tony. I would hope the citizens of Idaho who are watching this program would recognize that their state constitution is non-existent in this area, and you can't depend on Washington to protect the right of privacy of the citizens of Idaho. The state constitution has got to be there, and borrow Montana's language. It's great and strong. Borrow California's language and put it into your constitution, but do it fast, because Big Brother's coming.
Steve Sheen.
And so's Little Brother.
I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to ask you a quick question that could almost be answered yes or no. You're a public figure. You know the pluses and minuses. Should you be treated differently than a private citizen?
No. No. I just want my privacy like I want everybody else's. Maybe it's a little harder for me to have, because people recognize me when I go in the market or in restaurants or whatever, but I don't think I should be treated any differently.
Not even from the perspective of the news, from the media?
No. I mean...
Your book's no more open than anyone else's?
That's no more open, no more closed than anyone else's. If I were guilty of some infraction, I would expect the media to report it and not treat me with kid gloves.
On that note, we'll bring the program to a conclusion. Bill Press, on behalf of the panel and staff, thank you for being with us in Coeur d'Alene.
Thank you. It was great fun.
It's been most informative. Ladies and gentlemen, as I indicated at the beginning of the program, we will have a 6-week series. We have 5 more weeks with you, and in that time we're going to deal with such specific areas as high tech and the question of privacy. We're also going to deal with personal relationships and privacy, and we're going to address specifically the United States Constitution issue of privacy, and then finally we're going to talk about an individual as your body, your person, and the issue of privacy. As our guest has indicated today, there's certainly something that affects every person in this country, and we hope you will join us for the next 5 weeks, and that also that you will contact us about suggestions you have for future programs. I again would like to invite you to be with us next week when we continue this series. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Telemedia Services on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.